What did slaves eat in ancient Rome? An unexpected journey into their daily life. Subscribe to the Lived History channel and leave a like on the video. The diet of Roman slaves varied greatly depending on where they worked. Urban, rural, domestic, or mining slaves had access to different foods. However, there were some basic foods common to all. One of the staple foods was pulse, a porridge made from barley or spelt, considered a poor but nutritious dish, cheap and easy to prepare. Cato the Elder, in his work De Agricultura, describes it as a common meal among rural workers and slaves, often enriched with vegetables when possible. Even Pliny the Elder, in the Naturalis Historia, emphasizes the importance of pulse in the Roman diet, mentioning that even the nobility consumed it. This dish, cooked in large cauldrons, could be served with vegetables, or if available, small pieces of meat. Another essential food was broad beans, Vicia faba, rich in protein and very nutritious. Varro, in his work Rerum Rusticarum, cites them as essential for field workers, thanks to their ability to provide energy and physical resistance. Broad beans were often boiled or mashed to form a paste and could be mixed with other legumes to make the meal more substantial. Another common dish was moritum, a spread made from herbs, garlic, olive oil, and cheese. Easy to make and cheap, it was perfect for sustaining slaves during long working days. It was usually eaten with bread, making it a complete meal. This dish is described in the poem Moritum, traditionally attributed to Virgil, which tells of the preparation of the dish by a peasant named Similo. Pliny the Elder also speaks of it, highlighting the use of herbs and fresh cheeses in the peasant diet. Bread, panis, was the mainstay of the slave's diet. It was made with low-quality grains, such as barley, and was harder and less refined than that consumed by the wealthier classes. It was known as panis plebeius, and according to Pliny the Elder, was an essential food for slaves and the poor. Horace, in the Satires, mentions this coarse bread, emphasizing the simplicity of the diet of the common people. Panis plebeius was often the only source of energy for slaves, consumed for lunch and dinner. Olives and olive oil were also common elements in the slave's diet. Pliny the Elder mentions how olives, raw or preserved in salt, together with bread, formed the basis of the diet of rural workers. Olive oil, of inferior quality, was used to flavor dishes. As for drinks, slaves often consumed aqua mulsa, a slightly fermented mixture of water and honey. Honey, widely used in ancient Rome as a sweetener and preservative, was also used to make energy drinks. Pliny the Elder writes that mulsa water was a refreshing and easily digestible drink. The famous recipe book of Apicius also refers to the use of honey in drinks, often mixed with water or wine. Lentils, lentes, were another key food for slaves, due to their ease of preservation and preparation. Pliny the Elder describes them as an essential food for the poor, while Horace and Juvenal, in their satires, mention them to highlight the simplicity of the popular diet compared to the sumptuous banquets of the Roman elite. Lentils were boiled, made into soups, or mixed with other grains and vegetables. Dried fruit, such as raisins, passum, and dried figs, carica, were also widely consumed. Tacitus notes that they were often distributed as part of slaves' rations, especially during periods of intense work. Horace, in his satires, reports that the poor were content with bread and a handful of raisins to sweeten their day. These fruits were easily preserved and provided a quick source of energy. Cheese, caseus, was one of the few dairy products in the slave's diet. They generally consumed fresh cheeses, made from goats' or sheep's milk, as they were cheaper and easier to produce. Their soft texture and delicate flavor made them ideal to accompany bread or legumes. Pliny the Elder described the different types of cheese available in Rome, noting that the simplest and freshest were the most consumed by the working classes. In his poem Moritum, Virgil illustrates how cheese was an essential element of the Roman peasant diet, narrating the preparation of a cream of herbs and fresh cheese to accompany bread. Columella also mentions the production of cheese in rural villages, emphasizing that it was often intended for slaves. The cheese-making process began with the curdling of the milk, achieved by adding agents such as fig juice or vinegar. This process separated the milk into curds and whey, with the former being drained and compacted into simple molds, forming small pieces of fresh cheese. This could be consumed immediately or left to mature for a few days, depending on the needs and storage conditions. While fresh cheese was consumed quickly, especially in the warmer months, in rural areas the matured cheese was preferred, which lasted longer. Domestic slaves who served the wealthier families generally had access to a more varied and sometimes higher quality diet. During banquets, convivia, wealthy families displayed their status with tables laden with meat, fish, fruit, bread, and wine. These celebrations, which could last hours or even days, generated large quantities of leftovers, often destined for slaves. Thus, those who worked in patrician households could consume food prepared in the home kitchens, including meat, fish, and the finest bread. Juvenal, in his satires, highlights the gap between the diet of domestic slaves and that of rural slaves. House slaves feed on the leftovers of banquets, while peasants eat the hard bread of the countryside. Meal times varied according to the type of work performed and the environment, urban or rural, but followed a common routine. The day began with prandium, a light breakfast consumed at dawn, around 6 or 7 in the morning, before work activities. The main meal, supper, was held in the late afternoon, between 4 and 6 o'clock, after the most strenuous tasks had been completed. In some cases, especially for those who had a greater workload or more generous masters, an evening meal, vesperna, was scheduled around 7 to 21 o'clock. This was a light meal of bread, fruit, or leftovers, more common among urban and domestic slaves. City slaves, working in large centers such as Rome, Ostia, or Pompeii, enjoyed a more varied diet than those in the countryside, thanks to their proximity to markets and food distribution centers. Rural slaves, on the other hand, depended almost exclusively on the products of the estate where they worked, with a simpler and more monotonous diet. Even more difficult were the conditions of the slaves employed in the mines, where food was scarce and of very poor quality, providing just enough to survive and continue working. Seneca, in his letters, emphasizes the widespread malnutrition among slaves, who often received only the bare minimum to maintain physical strength. Their diet thus reflected the harsh reality of life in the Roman Empire, marked by profound inequalities. Subscribe to the Lived History channel and leave a like on the video.